really cool. Awesome. Hey, Charles, how's it going?
Hey Caitlin, it's going well. How are you?
Good, good. Happy Sunday. Thanks for joining me today for
Oh,
our little podcast episode. I'm so excited.
of course, thank you for having me. I am also excited.
Good, good. Before we jump right in, just kind of wanted to ask you some quick little questions and then we'll jump into the juiciness of what you have to share today. So I'm super excited.
For sure.
My first question for you is, are you spiritually active? Yes or no?
I would say yes, I am spiritually active.
I feel like it's kind of rhetorical when I ask all my guests that because why would you be on this podcast if you weren't, right?
Well, I
Um,
mean, awareness is awareness.
right? What does being spiritually active mean to you?
Me personally, it just kind of comes down to being in touch with myself,
Mm,
understanding that instead of spirituality being this thing I seek or look for outside of me, it's always something I can tune into that's always present that I sometimes forget is there as I get distracted with life or the physical form is knowing that it's in me instead of outside of me, which is it's taken a long time in my life to kind of understand that.
yeah. We always hear like the universe is not elsewhere, it's within.
Mhm.
Um, And it's interesting, in the past couple of weeks, especially even, I've noticed myself thinking along that track a little bit more of it's me. Like everything is me. I am everything. Um, and I just think that's so cool to have that mindset of like, I've got all I need, you know?
You saying that literally has given me chills. So like you just oh, and me re-saying that is giving me chills again is just like I feel like we're a
Goosebumps.
reflection, like you saying that and you standing in that power and you understanding that, saying it to
Mm,
me receiving it, and I'm still literally in chills right now of just
yeah.
saying
Oh
those
my
words because
gosh, my
I've
eyes
also been
water.
having those same thoughts and feelings of like it's like this sense of awe and like, oh my
Yes.
goodness, and like it's so easy in today's society to forget and get distracted and like I need this or I want this or I should be doing this. Instead, it's like it's always here, always here.
Yep.
So thank you
I
for
hate the
sharing
word
that.
should.
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
I know I'm
I'm
trying to find a
eliminating
different one.
should from my vocabulary, you
We're
know.
working
It's
on the
hard.
same. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Thinking about like your spiritual activation, right? Or just the way that you do turn inward and connect with yourself. What are some of your favorite modalities to do that?
My favorite for sure is meditation. The one I use most is definitely
Mm-hmm.
not meditation. It's a strange thing of it. I teach it all the time of presence and mindfulness and being aware, but it's something I struggle with like incorporating into my day to day the most. That being
Same.
said, there are that like I don't hold a ton of space for that in my routine right now. I like to speak of my life and like as in this moment. Um, but what I do well is something from a yoga practice I learned is even catching the breath for one, maybe two cycles in a day. That's meditation to
Hmm.
me. That it's not like something you have to like envision a monk
Oh.
sitting on a mountain like in Om for 30 minutes. Instead, it's like, okay, I'm feeling this emotion start to well up. Let me recenter, let me come back to my breath, let me slow it all down, and then like let the moment re-evolve from there. And if it's still, like you come back and you pull it in. And I feel like that is definitely it for
Hmm.
me. I mentioned yoga. Yoga is something that I passion and love. But I'm also in a phase right now where I'm really resisting my practice and I'm really like starting to evaluate what that tension is there. It's still like I love teaching it, but like as a student to show
Mm-hmm.
up on my mat, it's like a daunting task right now that I'm just working through. And that's kind of the beauty of the practice though. It's like you go with the flow. You just you so yeah, those have been the top two for me lately.
I
Did
love
I
that.
answer the question?
It You sure did. And
Okay.
it's funny, actually. I had this exact conversation. We haven't talked about this. I had this exact conversation with someone yesterday around like feeling like yoga has not been my path lately, but I love it so much. Like it's such
Mm-hmm.
a weird,
Mm-hmm.
it's my sanctuary and the thing that I love to move my body with most, but also at the same time, I have been like, I'm not ready to meet myself there. I'm not ready to
Mm-hmm.
like do the things.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. Maybe there's
That's
kind of some
beautiful. Another
funky,
synchronicity.
energetic. Yeah, yeah.
My
We're
uncle
just
was in from
aligned, you and I.
Tucson. My uncle was in from Tucson, and we were having this exact conversation of just my like as a like to teach it and to like spread the gospel of yoga. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing better. But at this phase of my life, I don't know if it's
Oh,
all the changes or what, but I'm like you worded it perfectly. I'm not ready to meet a version of myself right now at this juncture, and
mm-hmm.
that's something I used to, resist and be like, oh, but I'm really surrendering to it and just Svedjaya. I'm studying it, I'm examining it, I'm trying to understand what it is instead of meeting it with force or
Yeah,
resistance and creating chaos around it, you know?
totally. And sometimes, to your point, like the chaos I create in my own mind is the problem most of the time. And what actually
Absolutely.
creates the resistance, it's not me feeling, I don't like the word lazy either, but like I do believe lazy days need to happen, right? And like it's not me not wanting to move my
100%.
body. It's not me wanting to like stop and breathe. I think it's that I know, like we talked about breath work that one time we saw each other at the coffee shop. It's like, shoot, I know there's something here.
Hmm.
And what do I do about that kind of thing,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know?
And I think there's, like
So
you said, the rest days part. I don't mean one more tangent, but like
yeah, go, no, go, go,
s-
go.
sometimes those rest days are necessary to let whatever it is come out, that we don't
Totally.
show up as like maybe sometimes yoga or our modalities are a distraction, of like you said, there's something in the under the surface, and like giving that a safe space to sort of crawl out or evolve or become then what
Yes.
you nurture and evolve through. So, yep.
I don't know if you've heard the term rotting. It's like a trendy term right now.
Rotting with T's or
Right.
D's?
Tea.
Rotting.
Like I'm
Okay.
just rotting in my bed all day. And I think the
Okay.
context is usually like if you had a crazy night the night before, like I'm just gonna let myself lay in bed all day. But
Right.
literally there are some days where I like I'm just gonna rot in bed all day in
Yep.
a positive manner. And
Literally,
and I
right,
think
right.
that's helpful.
I think as a society, I can't speak for me, I've been conditioned to think that you always have to be on
Hmm.
it, going towards something, working towards something, but I joke that my profession is like leisure now. Like I'm
Yes.
seeking as
I
much
love that.
leisure as possible, right? Like
Hmm.
I'll do whatever it takes to create leisure because that space to just be
Yes.
is holy to me. Gave me chills. So,
Amen.
yeah.
The sacred. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Um, so I would love to like introduce you to the listeners. Can you tell us a little bit more about you, like your background, your history, all the things that have led up to make the person that I'm talking to right now?
For sure. Thank you, first of all, for creating a space. My name's
Of course.
Charles. I am 36 years old. I don't know how much of this is needed but I
Give it
grew up
all.
in
We love
Tucson.
it all.
Here it all comes. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. Kind of a childhood where my father was trying to be present, but just battled his own mental health struggles from a very early age. He lost his
Mm.
father. My father eventually died when I was 13. So just kind of growing up with only a mom and sisters, I feel like I just developed a little bit of an extra sensitivity in my life. Fast
Hmm.
forward to 22 years of age, I was really uncertain. School was not for me. The education path was not for me. I tried. I came from like a background of a lot of education was the forefront. I just didn't fit into that mold.
Sure.
So I kind of felt lost at life, and I joined the military. And in the military, I did develop and kind of establish a lot of things that were necessary in my life, a lot of structure. I learned I need kind of structure and balance, and like
Yeah.
I always resist rigidity, but there's a balance in finding it, and the military taught me that. Part of my journey in the military was kind of chaotic. I feel like people who are pulled to serve, it's not, the military presents itself as this opportunity. And when I joined it, I never got that satisfaction of service. There were moments
Mm,
and glimmers, but it never like felt like I was showing up and doing the work of service.
sure.
So I eventually got out. I went to school for a little bit. I was in nursing school at the U of A because again, I wanted service. Service is always something that I've like been pulled to.
Yeah.
Realized I'm not someone who can handle blood and gore and guts, and like it was a blessing in disguise. I couldn't do nursing school. I tried. I gave it my best, but through this time, I was really starting to understand my own mental health. I was 30, I was going through a separation, a divorce, and it like life was just really heavy. Um, I was going to the VA for mental health care. They had me on 5 different medications, like
Wow.
various things. I was desperate. I really, really, really wanted to feel better, and I had this like idea of happiness, and like I would hate seeing happy people. It was like I hated hearing I was depressed. I hated hearing everything about mental health. So I was finally like desperate to just do anything to like change the narrative and the way I was perceived and the way I perceived life. So I
Yeah.
was going in and out of VA healthcare, and I'm not bashing VA and not saying anything negative about it, but it just didn't work for me. Nothing
Sure.
about it worked for me. The counseling services were very, I just didn't resonate with the counselors. I was kind of passionate about like letting them know I didn't want to be on medicine. I was open to try it, and
Yep.
it just kind of it felt like it made things numb. I'm not gonna say worse or better, but just definitely numb. And then it got to a point where the numbness was also like daunting. Like I wanted to feel anything, but it was really challenging too. Um, so I ended up finding through bartending a gentleman who used to attend my bar a lot. He was an old psychiatrist, and he
Mm,
was always talking about marijuana and mushrooms and just like very free spirit and living. And like me, I was like, oh my, what? That stuff's evil. Like you can't touch it.
right?
And anyways, I um, got a hold of some of the mushrooms months later. And I was, to be honest, I was in a suicidal state. Like within the last few months, I had just really contemplated a lot of it. I was just done. The numbness was, I was just done. So my mindset was, if I'm willing to kill myself, why am I not willing to try mushrooms? And that night,
Wow.
yeah, it was looking back, just a powerful time and necessary for my
Yeah.
growth and development. So I had gone home with the mushrooms, and I had an experience where I died and I was transported to heaven. And God, or
Mm,
my version of God, whatever spirit, source, self, was speaking to me, and I was able to see everything in my life, the people, my kids, the blessings I have, everything was like this enchanted version of reality of that I was already living in, but just like showing awareness to it.
yeah.
And this voice, the spirit was speaking to me, showing me like how beautiful things were. And my body was crying, but I wasn't my body, I was my spirit.
Yes.
And then, as though the fingers snapped, it turned to hell. People were dying around me. I was in despair. I'm going to get emotional talking about this, but everything that I had been shown was a true blessing in my life was in flames and
Gone.
engulfed in like misery, and everyone around me was miserable. And this voice was saying, like, it's not so bad, is it? what you have right now, you have everything. You have created this life that you're living in, like your awareness, everything is
Wow.
here, right? So coming back, like in the psychedelic state for me, I can't speak for everyone, but everything feels permanent. When I was in heaven, it was permanent. When I was in hell, it was permanent. So just to come back to Charles and to be
Ugh.
normal was, I felt blessed for months after that one experience. I got off all my medication and I became super passionate about just psychedelics and plant medicine as a whole, and just kind of like understanding that it's not for everyone, but for the people that it does help,
So
it
beautiful.
has proven to be very helpful for me. So that kind of a nice segue for where we're going, and then to kind of finish the story of that was about 6 years ago. Where I'm at now is I am a radically different person. One more segment about that is everyone in my life who was really concerned about me, and I could tell was concerned about me, kept telling me I needed to find God.
Mm.
And to me, as a young man, I had always had this perception of God as like this entity outside of me that I needed to appease and somehow show that I trust and faith in it. And it's like a constant thing
Wow.
that I had to work towards. And so that experience taught me that God is always present in me, and it's it, she, he, them, they, it, him, whatever you want to address it as, it's love to me and it's in my heart, and it's something like we had
Mm.
talked about. It's like it's just here. It's coursing through us. It's connecting us. It's the fabric of which it all is, like it's always there, you know. It's not something I have to
Yes.
seek or like meditate to like prove my worthiness to. It's just it's there. And so that one experience kind of like taught me my own connection to spirit, my own connection to spirituality, and like yeah, so I've now found this path. And one more little cross segment is around this time that I started finding spirituality, I got really into Ram Dass.
Big
Ram
fan of
Dass
Ram
is
Dass over here.
would love some Ram Dass. But he had
Yes.
so he and Timothy Leary took kind of two different paths with the psychedelics. Timothy Leary went one way where the government was saying he's the most feared man, dangerous man in the world, and Ram Dass kind of got into breath work and meditation.
Mm.
And part of the psychedelic experience that Ram Dass talks about is, and that resonated with me from that experience I had, is psychedelics can be like an elevator to heaven, to sit in the sanctuary space with Jesus and the angels, but you always have to come down.
Yes.
And the way to truly connect with yourself is through breathwork, meditation, and yoga. So
Mm.
once I kind of learned that, and I was like having less and less psychedelic experiences that are so profound that I like come out in tears and like answers and clarity, it starts getting a little bit murkier and murkier in ways.
Yep.
So now where I'm at is loving yoga and showing up and just understanding that each day is a new day to just be myself and like find gratitude. So
Yeah. What a beautiful story. Like I
thank you.
seriously, I it's funny. I think up until this point I didn't recognize like we have a similar experience in the sense I loved what you said of I was tired of being told I was sad or depressed. I struggled with anxiety deeply in high school, and I was exactly like you. I was very resistant to placing chemicals in my body because I was scared that they would make me feel almost worse.
Hmm.
And so I had to learn like other ways to cope with that like heaviness that like it's almost you know when people say like oh they're heartbroken, that's a real physical feeling, and sometimes you
Hmm.
can't place the reasoning for that feeling. It's just this like heaviness in your heart, in your chest. And I looking back, like I wish I discovered a lot of things similar to you earlier on, like yoga and meditation and breath work. I think I was a little bit younger in that journey, but still, it's such a message that we continue to send of like, you're sad, you're going through it. And it's like, that's not, words have power. We can't keep hearing
Hmm.
that
Right.
to heal and to get over that. Like there is an edge when you kind of escape like that really dark place where you're like, I want to end my life. I don't
Hmm.
want to be here anymore. Like everything does feel permanent. And I just think you said that so beautifully of there's other ways, and as long as we can find that like just little ounce or spark of motivation's not the right word, but like connection where we're like, no,
Hmm.
like there is a journey after this,
Hmm.
and I am going through this for a very specific reason. Like, how can I rise from here? And I think that's so hard for a lot of people to see, like that other side, or find
Hmm.
that spark when there's so much pressure to just not feel bad and to feel
Right.
better, you know?
I
And
think.
that's relative to everybody. My better is different than your better. And that's different from my better
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow or yesterday,
Yes, preach. I
you
love
know?
that. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but that's something yoga teaches me. That lesson
Yes.
right there, that of the version you are today might be way different than yesterday, and it's going to be different tomorrow. And like honoring that, that's okay. Like that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
another thing you said I really liked is resonates with me is shit, I lost it. I start talking about yoga and I get excited and distracted.
Woo.
Um, the expectation to be okay, where you're that
Yes.
what you were talking about is like people will maybe not expect it of you, and maybe it's like be part of being an empathetic person, but like I don't want to even be around people if I'm sad or depressed because it's
Oh,
like
yeah. I am an isolator for sure.
big. And I used to kind of, I grew up in a household where it's like you got to talk about it. Let's talk about it. Like pull it out of you. Like what is it? It's not understood, and it's like I don't even know half the time. So like to get someone else's input, it's I don't know. It's been a
Yeah.
challenge of me of like people in my life who just kind of don't understand the mental health space. It's like they want to fix and help, and it's like it's almost doing more damage because you telling me how I should be or how I should show up or how I
Yes.
should feel is like putting that pressure on me. It's planting seeds in my head of like, well, I still don't have the answers, but now I have more expectations of what I should be doing.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you highlighted like nothing against programs like the VA, right? Like those are great for a lot of people. But part the difficulty about like our own mental health journeys is that we do have to find what works for us. For some folks, medications and different types of them work amazingly, and I'm so grateful that there are those opportunities to heal, right? And some people like don't really get educated past the more Western philosophies. And so I think I'm just really excited to hear, like, out in the ether, the lexicon that we find ourselves in now. There's a lot more openness to Eastern philosophy, and modalities of healing, and or a combination of the two, right?
Hmm.
Like you might
Right.
go to quote unquote conventional talk therapy. I firmly
Hmm.
believe in that, but that might just be for a piece of your journey.
Hmm.
Um, or
Absolutely.
maybe it's something that you need really consistently. And I love like also how you highlighted like we always have to come down from whatever that experience that we're having, whether it be psychedelics or something else. There's always this sense of returning to, I love the word homeostasis because it has home in it,
Hmm. Hmm.
of there is a state that we find ourselves in. I don't like the word normal, but normalcy. And the journey, I think the beauty of figuring out your mental health and like how to heal yourself is indeed the journey itself and experimenting
Hmm.
with those things, even though it can get really freaking hard to do that.
Right.
You know, it's
Hmm.
exhausting, if you will.
Hmm. Literally
So,
I mean, why we talked earlier about rest days and how necessary it is to rot, like it gets gnarly, and like even though we are aware that we're creating all the chaos, all the mayhem in our minds, it doesn't make it easier to navigate when we're in it, you know? And like,
Totally.
it doesn't, like, we have the tools, we know we're educating, we're educated on how to navigate our mental health, but that doesn't make the journey and when you're in the suck any
Yeah,
easier. But it
totally.
makes it that much better when you come out of it, right? Of like, not come out, because it usually takes work, not usually, it does take coming through it, like you're navigating it. I like to use that term of like, you're not dealing with it, you're navigating it. It's like you're showing up in the moment and assessing and
Hmm.
understanding what's going on. And like, it might not be clear to you until you have hindsight, but like, you said
Yes.
something earlier too about the suffering. Like the wound is where the light enters, right? So like I was always taught like
Oh,
avoid danger, avoid like that hardship, but like sitting in it and experiencing it, again, what yoga has taught me is like it's a moment, it's impermanent. Like the state you're in will change. And I also we live in duality, right? Like so understanding that if you're here, you're gonna have a time where you're here. And I
absolutely.
love, like you say, homeostasis is almost a blessing. It's like you're not here because you know at either end of the polar side, you're gonna have to
Yes.
come in the middle. And like homeostasis is actually like the goal to
Yeah.
me, you know,
Yeah.
like the older I get, it's like I just want nervous system here. Like I'm cool with
Yes.
baseline, like understanding that like here and here is good, but like here is ideal.
Amen. I love that.
Yep. That's what
Thinking a
you
little
actually
bit
said,
more.
where I was like thinking, pardon me, our
Yeah,
interruption, but like I was like,
you're
there's
good.
something you said. It was about the suffering and how like being in it is
Yeah.
it's just as beautiful as being out of it.
Yes. As shitty as it can be, it
As shitty as it gets. Yep.
shapes you. It shapes
Yep.
you for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. Um, so before I want to talk about your military experience, but I think first what's important to hear a little bit more about is indeed what we were just discussing around like, hey, Western methods of healing weren't working for me. So can you tell us a little bit about like your journey into more of the Eastern medicine path, plant medicine? We've talked about yoga a little bit, but I think to your earlier point, psychedelics and you know, drugs, quote unquote, freak people out and they don't have kind of the background to see the potential of healing. And so I'd love to learn a little bit more about like your journey and how you became convicted after that first experience that you had.
For sure. I kind of after that first experience, like you said earlier, there becomes signs are always there, in my
Mm,
opinion. It's whether we're tuned in to see them. And it's not a good thing or a
absolutely.
bad thing. It's like personal. I mean, and the signs could mean anything. Like you see your sign, your numbers, whatever that resonates with you. Pardon my dogs are barking. One, let me mute
Uh-oh.
once.
Is it juice or pickle?
Both.
There must be an Amazon guy. This is actually perfect because my phone's about to fall, so I'm gonna fix
Perfect.
it really quick.
Quick
But I'm still
segue.
listening to you.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
All right. I closed the blinds on them. Um, I might have to get Mason to help me.
Oh yeah, you're
Pickle,
good.
stop. It's okay. Thank you. Thank you. I bought them these bark collars.
Yeah.
They despise them. They
Oh
won't
yeah.
even move when they're wearing the collar, much less go bark at the mailman or whatever. So it's like
Yeah.
they're definitely playing me for a fool. Um,
Yeah.
but so kind of after that first experience, shortly after that I had like an 8 hour drive. And
Wow.
my drive was like the next day or 2 days later. There's sometimes with mushrooms, there's something called the afterglow effect, where the experience happens and then you're just kind of flooded with this elated state of like bliss. It's called an afterglow. So that's definitely part of this drive, but it was like every road sign had an angel number. Everything I was thinking, like a song would come on. So there was all these like synchronicities that would come up that made me just like really start to nerd out about it. And then obviously with the plant medicine, I was like, I'm the type that if I'm a little bit interested in something, I'm head first into it. So I
Yeah.
just started researching everything I could and like what plant medicines help with what and what. And then I also had this guy that I mentioned. He was an old he was a he had just I don't want to give too much of his background. He had a very interesting background with mental health, psychiatry, and where he's at now with like plant medicines. And
Sure.
he was also someone I would talk to a lot and like learn a bit about what to do, what to look into. He
And this
linked
is
me
the
up with
man from before, correct?
at
The
the
man
bar.
that.
He was a
Yeah, yeah.
gentleman who would
Okay,
always
cool.
come to I was a bartender, and his daughter
Yeah.
had a dance class right next to the bar, so he'd come hang out.
I love
Um,
that. What a blessing.
it, yeah, truly. But he connected me with an ayahuasca shaman in Tucson, which was my next plant medicines experience, which
Hmm.
um, was also just beautiful and powerful in and of itself. At this time, I was done with VA everything. Like I said, I'm all or nothing. So as plant
Yep.
medicine became this whole thing, I completely neglected and avoided the other side of it, which you talked about talk therapy. I'm starting to come back around, and we can also in this conversation come back around to where I'm at with that. But
Yeah.
with ayahuasca, it's a much different, I'm gonna say, experience, ceremony, relationship. You know, with the mushrooms, it was just me. I had no idea what to expect. With ayahuasca, and I would kind of recommend not taking this way, actually, is like I read a lot about it. So as I read about it, I create expectations or something I wanted from it, right? Instead of surrendering to what
Right.
the medicine shows you or gives you or like helps you with. I had like I want to go in heal trauma. Like once I even learned what healing felt
Yeah.
like, that became like all I want is I need to heal. And like I feel like my experiences with ayahuasca were kind of rushed, if I'm gonna be honest. Like
Sure.
instead of sitting with what came up with mushrooms and like letting that integrate into my life, it now became this like journey of like how much can I do? How quickly can I heal? Like let's get this thing going, like
Yep.
instead of just honoring the process and sitting with the gratitude I had gained from a little bit of healing and like letting it fold. So my ayahuasca
Yeah.
ceremonies were beautiful though. I'm not gonna that I don't mean to take away from it, but I also didn't show
Yeah.
up to those with the most intention or honor that space truly. And I haven't been to an ayahuasca ceremony since, just because I'm really waiting to hear the call instead of forcing something
Yeah.
out of it. Um,
I have heard that me and a friend actually were potentially planning to go do an ayahuasca ceremony in the next year or so, and I told her I was like, I'm not feeling called yet. Like, if you are, I want you to go.
hmm
But I am like you in the sense that I know there's stuff to heal in there. I do this with my
hmm
breath work all the time too. I'm going tonight and I'm like, what can I not go with? What can I not carry with me? I create expectations. I do that in my yoga
hmm
practice too. Like that's just a
So,
human thing.
hmm
Um, Especially when you know like what that bottom feels like, what those deep hurting it's almost like you know your trauma and you expect
hmm
the whether it's plant medicine or some whatever modality that you're practicing. It's like when I leave this, I'm going to be better. And
Right.
that's not always the case. Sometimes things get a little bit to your point in the process not darker but different things
Mm,
start to move and shake on their own, but the biggest thing that you said is surrender to it. Like you have to let it come and you have to let the work happen without forcing it, which
sure.
is really so hard.
Which there's a lot of similarities between what I'm learning in plant medicine and yoga, and that's like you just said that this lesson of surrender of like how many times have you been in a shape where you're like resisting it, resisting it, resisting
Mm,
it, and you just like one more breath and you're able to somehow get deeper and like then you have that release, right? Of like
yes.
then the healing actually like in that moment you have the idea, but the healing is after, right? And it's the same kind of with psychedelic experiences in my experiences is like you have that clarity, but then the healing is the integration of how you let
Yeah.
what you've learned in that moment dictate or shape how you show up to trauma or like instances or like triggers or past experiences that are trying to like work their way back into your cycle. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
that's to me the healing is like it's we do these modalities to like I don't know, get clarity or like confirmation or validation of like, oh yeah, that's what's going on, but like the
Yes.
healing is how you show up and how you continue to show up, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Your practices, your spiritual practices simply create the space, but you have to be fully committed to showing up, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't have a lot of experiences with plant medicine and or psychedelics, and I think there's like kind of a mix up, if you will, of like what each of those are. So can you break down like what are psychedelics? What's plant medicine? Are they the same? Are they different? Like myth bust that a little bit for us.
For sure. I try to be intentional with my words surrounding the space. Like the word
Yeah.
drug, I will not call mushrooms a drug unless, quick
Yeah.
side note, death and reincarnation under God's supervision. So that to me is a drug, right?
Oh, okay. I
Death,
love that.
death and reincarnation under God's supervision. But I
And
really
I
try
used
to,
that word earlier because
I
I
know,
don't believe
and
that
but
either. Yeah, yeah.
I still do, I catch myself, but as I speak about the space, I really try to be cautious because
Yeah.
of my own
It's got a stigma.
it's got a stigma. I was so terrified of it being put in the military.
Yes.
It's called a drug. It's in we could talk about the history of why it's we're so scared of it, but so between psychedelic and plant medicine is where I'm kind of like a psychedelic could be, let's say, LSD,
Sure.
MDMA, MDA, 2CB, something that I forget the exact like the Greek meaning of psyche and delos. It's like internal evaluation, like
Mm.
understanding self is kind of what psychedelic breaks down to.
Okay.
But the further I get into the path, I kind of like honor what comes from the earth a little bit more. So that's why I consider or I refer to it as plant medicine. So that's your mushrooms, cannabis, ayahuasca, peyote, wachuma, um, the plant, not
Sure.
synthetic, right? So that's kind of, I mean, to each their own. There's people who gain a lot from LSD, like for instance, the seven step program for alcohol addiction
Mm-hmm.
was created by a man on an LSD journey and like used in some of his ways to create that therapy setting. So I'm not saying all other psychedelics are not mind expanding and medicinal, but for me and my journey and the way I speak about it as plant medicine is kind of it's still a psychedelic, but under an umbrella
Right.
that's a little bit different. It's a natural form,
Yeah.
which
What's that's really helpful because what's cool to me, I watched I think it's a 6 or 7 part series that the nursing program at the University of Pennsylvania put on. This is a few years ago. I actually think maybe during or right after the pandemic. And they used a variety of psychedelics to support PTSD, and patients that you know, as we were talking about earlier, that more Western form of healing and therapy was not working for.
hmm
And like medicines such as MDMA were used, some used mushrooms. So it was just really interesting because, to your point, I think it is to each your own, but you have to kind of go in knowing, like, hey, I'm educated on what this is that I'm putting in my body. If
hmm
something from the earth feels better to me, then
hmm
maybe that's your path, you know?
for sure. And kind of something that I'm really proud of Western medicine for even starting to adopt it is like everything in America seems to be built on how can we profit from this. The
Hmm.
plant medicine space is a little bit different because, like what we were talking about earlier with Ram Dass, and that experience starts to get hard, let's say more challenging to get up and maintain because you always come down. So
Yes.
where's the profit in that, right? And that's where
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be interesting to see where we go with Western medicine in this, because if we're now finally coming to terms with this is actually healing instead of treating, how do
Oh,
we
I love
profit
that.
and how do we keep a patient out of continuing to, we don't have to prescribe it. If we can do 3 sessions with someone, completely give them the tools needed to navigate their mental health on their own, and then we're done with them as a client, as a patient, as a customer, like that's where I think that without getting conspiratorial, that like Western medicine has resisted plant medicine is like this is ancient earth technology that has been
Hmm.
given to humans as this modality of like it's a symbiotic relationship. Like I truly believe that each of these plants has a spirit, and this is this wise spirit. Specifically with ayahuasca, they refer to ayahuasca as mother.
Mm-hmm.
There is, ooh, I'm getting chills thinking about this, but there is in my opinion, no questions asked entity, spiritually entity that you interact with in that
Yes.
space. I was no longer Charles in this form. It's all in the spiritual realm, these experiences, so like it's mother,
Yeah.
there's it's a, there, it's mother, and they call it, they refer to that spirit as such. And so I
Yeah.
feel like these ancient technologies have let us be silly humans for long enough, but they are working their way back into our conscious. And like maybe it's this pivotal point in human evolution where
Oh,
technology is all of a sudden like raging. Like technology is moving at this fast rate that like I'm an old man, can't keep up with my kids of how quick they're in tune with technology. And maybe Earth is finally like, all right, guys, you've had your fun. Like it's time to come home. Like
yes.
it's time to come home. And like that's how I look at this, the plant medicines is like they are our allies, they are our wise elders. They have seen this cycle or a cycle like it so many times, and they've come from the earth, and they're just patiently sitting there. They're
Yes.
not screaming. They don't have to like scream a truth. I feel like, that's the ego, and every living thing is like, listen to me, I'm right, these medicines are good. It's like Earth is like, I'm chill if you do, I'm chill if you don't. Like, come to me.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to come hang out? Like, I'll show you my way of like being, but I don't have to force you to. Like, you're my child. I'm not going to force you to do anything. You're free. And that's the beauty of being a human. And that's kind of the beauty of this psychedelic or plant medicine path is like, in the beginning, I was very like, no, you don't understand. You have to try mushrooms. Like, this will change your life. And now it's like, no, if it's not for you, it's not for you. Like
Yeah.
no difference. We're still team human. Like I still support all your growth. Like if you're talking to a counselor and you're on 2 different medications, like blessings to you. I hope
Two thumbs
your
up. Yeah.
healing will reflect my healing, and like just as long as there's no judgment on either side, I think is kind of the important thing about
Yeah. Oh,
that.
I think that's beautiful. Like truly at the end of the day, I have personally, honestly, had a lot of judgment earlier like in my life around just, you know, some of these different medicines that we have available to us, whether it is Eastern or Western, right? Like some people
Hmm.
think, no, you're like totally on your own and you can't use anything to support you. And
Hmm.
that's simply not true. And I love that you use the word technology because whether it's been given to us or we've created it, like it's all out there available. It's just a matter
Hmm.
of finding the technology or the platform that will help you elevate yourself. Like it's still
Hmm.
all comes from within. I firmly believe that. And these
Hmm.
are simply tools
Right.
to support that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Um, so thinking a little bit more about, you said ceremonies a few times, and I'd love to understand, like, what does that mean? Is there a ritual around practicing plant medicine, or is it something like you can do on your own? I think there's a lot of different
Sure, for
options,
sure.
but can you share some of those and maybe what you've experienced and what's worked for you?
For sure. That's a great question. So I view you can use them recreationally. You go to a festival or be hanging out with your
Yeah,
friends. You can go on a hike in nature. I'm speaking mostly to mushrooms and like cannabis, we'll say.
sure.
When you're using it with intention, right, for like say healing or looking for answers or something, then I consider it more like a ceremonial space in certain medicines like peyote, ayahuasca, um, even mushrooms. That mushrooms are definitely used in a
Mm-hmm.
ceremonial space. It's usually there's a facilitator, like a shaman or a guide, and then there is a set of intention leading up to the ceremony. It's they talk a lot about in the psychedelic space set and setting,
Mm-hmm.
your mindset, how you're showing up to the
Oh, I love
ceremonial
that.
space and the setting in which you're in. You don't want like chaos or anxiety or like your kids present or your dog's barking. You want to be able to dedicate that 6 hours, 12 hours, 18 hours to that space.
Yes.
So when I say ceremony, that's like coming into it with a lot more intention. Not, I shouldn't say a lot more, but with intention, with yeah, like with ayahuasca, your diet is clean for the month leading up to it, 2 months leading, three at three, like you're ideally sober off of all other substances because in order to really show up with, and that's a part of what I was speaking to
Mm.
earlier about my ayahuasca ceremonies, I didn't put a ton of intention with my cannabis use. So in
Mm.
a way, I feel like that was like, how much do I care when, the spirit was like, hey, I want you coming clean, no other allies with you so I can speak with you and sit with you. And then like you show up with homeboy in the back, like, what? So
What's he doing here?
yeah,
Yeah.
what is he or she doing here? Like I thought you were
Yeah,
coming
yep.
alone, so
Totally.
that's what kind of how I view and interpret and use the ceremonial space. And it's extremely important while we're on this subject to we're getting to a phase where everyone who thinks that they can be a shaman or a guide or a facilitator.
Yeah.
And I've also fallen into this trap where I'm like super passionate about the medicine. I have access to it. I want to help anyone and like let's have a ceremony, and like as the facilitator, it's a very vulnerable space. And then you can do more damage than good with someone who's trusting you with
Mm.
their mental space, so like
It's a
anyone
great
who's
point.
interested in it, be very cautious because I like to express it as like think of your ego, your exterior as this shell and your spirit
Ugh.
is this in the middle. And so like you crack yourself open, you're vulnerable. You're really leaving yourself vulnerable, like spiritually, like so if there's interest in psychedelic space, I always exercise caution. Do your research, like really trust your instincts, your emotion. If you have any, like you were saying earlier, you don't feel called to it, that is it. Like don't question
Yep.
it. That you'll know exactly when, where, how, right? And if you show up and you feel again like there, but that all said, there is a level of anxiety, even me. Every time I even touch mushrooms, my body gets this anxiety, this quiver, this
Yeah.
turning in my stomach because it's powerful. It's a powerful, powerful thing that you're surrendering to. So Yeah, it's I that's why I use ceremonial space, ceremony as a word evolved in that. And I used to have this mindset after mushrooms of like I won't ever touch them unless it's a ceremonial space, but I'm now I love going to a concert or a festival on a little bit of mushrooms,
Sure.
it's like I so but there are people who think that it should never be used in that situation, and that's understandable, but it's like it's a relationship, like I said, where each person gets to figure out and establish their own connection with it.
Yeah. I love I think for me like my anxiety specifically around psychedelics is that I will feel out of control, right?
Hmm.
And I love that you highlighted like you have to listen to your intuition immediately in the moment. It's not something you can just plan for and say, I'm gonna
Hmm.
sail across the sea and do all this awesome healing and participate in these ceremonies. Yes, in a sense you do have to plan if that's what you're hoping to pursue, but at the same time like there's this essence of, is the ceremony happening now and does it feel like a sacred space and ritual where I feel safe and protected and seen by myself enough to like jump into this experience? Because I think
Hmm.
also a lot of people think I have to be in the perfect mindset to do any sort of healing, let
Hmm.
alone like introduce a medicinal substance to the equation as well.
Hmm.
I know I pressure myself into being like I have to be like having the best day and like had done all my meditation, my yoga, all the rituals that I enjoy to put me in a good space, heart, mind, soul to do this. But in
Hmm.
reality, you mentioned like medicine, yoga, breath, whatever it is, like it's going to show you the way. You don't need to put pressure on yourself to show yourself the way.
Hmm.
And I think that's in a sense, like I said earlier, like that sense of relinquishing control for me is terrifying.
Hmm.
But how you feel on the other end of whatever experience that is incredible.
Hmm.
That's once you actually surrender, it's like, wow, I'm self-sovereign. I am the universe, like we were saying earlier.
Hmm.
Like there's just so much when you take that pressure off. But also
Hmm.
sometimes like it's that weird balance between, am I making the right space? Am I in the right energy? And maybe last minute you're like, actually no, I'm not. And
Hmm.
that's okay too.
Honoring right, exact, honoring that that's okay too, because
Yeah.
it's everything's timing, right? Like just because you had these expectations, you show up and then you decide no, beautiful, like that, maybe that was your
Yeah.
lesson, like trust your instinct.
Yep. Absolutely.
um
And that's hard in and of itself.
for sure,
Listening to your intuition. Mm-hmm.
for sure. I'm gonna go open a window really quick.
Oh, go for
It's
it.
getting dark.
Getting dark.
Yeah, right, we're getting dark.
That's perfect.
That's better, I
Cool.
think.
Um, I'd love to talk a little bit more about being a veteran. You mentioned to me a couple days ago, actually, like, hey, I'm looking to get more involved in that space and
Hmm.
support others on their healing journey. So, can you talk a little bit about like your time? I won't say like service, right? Or whatever you'd like to call it. And maybe how you're hoping to help it support and shape other veterans' experiences of healing once they've left
For sure,
wherever they found themselves in the military.
for sure. Yeah, thank you. That's another beautiful platform and I appreciate the question. So what I've come to understand just from my own experience is that like you don't have to experience times of war, mutilation, crimes of heinous to to come out of the military with a set of mental challenges, right? I'm not going to say my
Absolutely.
time in the service was without trauma or like some extreme situations, but I'm more of the mindset that something through our nature or our nurture pulls us to join the military. And with that, we come with an inherent set of maybe preconditioned elements that make us more vulnerable to mental health, we'll say, right?
Mm.
So as we as veterans are already maybe susceptible when we come out and we're now trying to fit in with society and like match that
Yes.
level of camaraderie because we are coming from this space where we're all very similar. That was what I loved about the military is like when you start to strip it down as people, we're very similar, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so when you get out and you're back cast amongst normalcy, it's really, really hard to find your pillars, your grounding, your
Mm.
people, your routine is everything like that we come to know as like time in the service. It's like jumbled out and you're like kind of, but
Yeah.
that, you know, there
You have
are
to
tons of
recreate
benefits.
yourself almost.
Exactly. And like
Yeah.
part of boot camp is like literally deprogramming you as an individual and like fall in line. So then for however how long you're in service, you without even being aware of it, I still get tripped out about it because like current me can't fathom surrendering one single right that I like signed away and like take my whole life away from me and make my decisions for me and just tell me where to show up and how to show up and I can fall in line for that. You know, and like because
Yeah.
like my whole
Tell me
life
what's
outside
important
those
to me. Yeah.
tell me what I can put in my body, force me to put certain things into my body, tell me what I can't put in my body, you know, like
Yeah.
it's wild when this version of me thinks about it.
Yeah. Isn't that
But
crazy?
yeah, but I think that's a huge part of that struggle of like getting out of the military, you know, and like
Hmm.
so then in the time you're in, you're so reliant upon the military and the government for everything that why would you not think that now your mental health is of the same importance?
Hmm.
So, you know, I think that you just, and it's heartbreaking. I'm going to get emotional talking about it. I was at the VA 2 days ago for something completely unrelated to mental health, and everyone I see there is so sick and unhealthy, and it's freaking heartbreaking. People in their
Yeah.
40s, bodies falling apart, like overweight, on crutch. I'm not sitting here saying I know anything about what they've been through or where they're at, but like these
Yeah.
people, these men and women are hurting, they're struggling. You can kind of sense it, and it's
There's an
really
energy
sad.
there. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Oh, it's you're giving me chills even saying that. There's
Yeah.
so these people
It's hard to
want and
watch.
need help. Yes,
Yeah.
it's tragic. And knowing that these are the people I spoke to moments ago that like I'm similar to them. I don't
Yeah.
need to know them to know that like we have something in common where we're here together figuring this out. And so taking all that and like knowing how, like you mentioned earlier, you were scared. I was terrified, Caitlin, of psychedelics, of mushrooms. My mom was a hippie in her own right, played around with all the crazy drugs in the 70s, and like she raised me to be terrified of mushrooms and LSD and like anything around it. So,
Hmm.
you know, to just be like to answer your question, to just be a beacon that can show you that yes, it's scary, but like if you lean into that fear and if you're at all curious, there is another way. There is another modality that maybe might work for you. And like it is cool to see. I got an email last week about the VA and a veteran study with psychedelics and PTSD because I think that's kind of the gateway
Wow.
that we're gonna see kind of break into that space is like the studies, and it's not a plant medicine. It's MDMA is kind of the or Molly
Yeah.
or ecstasy is kind of that psychedelic battering ram Trojan horse that's somehow making this normal in the space, and so there is light and there is hope. But I hope to just be by sharing my story, by being vulnerable, that's kind of like what I've always prided myself on is I'm an open book. I'll tell you anything you want to know about anything in my life. This
Yeah.
included it like I've had so I had a my old supervisor at my last unit before I got out. He was this just old crusty 19 year in chief. He was my supervisor. That man protected me in the Coast Guard like no one else. Just always looked after me, got me out of so much trouble, like just took care of me. And he ended up getting kicked out of the Coast Guard for an alcohol problem 6 months before he's due to retire. And now
Wow.
this is a man who's losing 19 years of service
I
out the
was about
drain
to say.
because the only substance they're really allowed or that's promoted in the military is alcohol and tobacco.
I did
So
not even
like,
think about that
yeah,
and why
right?
so many people
Yes.
and people are in or who have left
Mm-hmm.
struggle with
Mm-hmm.
that is because that's what's available to you for so long. Wow, holy crap.
Yep. It's right.
Sorry
So
to
this is
interrupt,
like,
but I
no,
I
no,
had
I'm glad you
no.
even brought, yeah, I'm like, so this guy, when he was going through all the shit of like, he's suing the government, suing the Coast Guard, like fighting his case of like, come on, 19 and a half years, like it was kind of a bogus way they set him up to get kicked out.
And he doesn't get
And
a lot of the benefits that he so
none
probably
of the
hardly
benefits,
earned.
right?
Yeah,
None of
yeah.
the benefits. So
It's messed up.
through this time, he became like he would lean on me of like, what the F? And I was always like, dude, cannabis, like, please try it out. Like, look where alcohol's gotten you. Like, there, like, just try it. And
Yeah.
I shit you not, like 2 weeks ago, he called me. Like, he's wild still, like 4 in the morning. I was up. I sometimes I'm a night owl, and I answer. I was like, "What the hell? What are you doing up?" And long story short, he's like all about cannabis now. His mental health has completely
Wow.
changed. He's like, "You were so right. Tell me more about mushrooms. Let's go do an ayahuasca ceremony." Like so like just to have that, like this is my supervisor coming to me now being like, you had
You saved
something
me.
you have like shown me the light, like tell me more. Like this is your and I don't like to say I'm right, but like this is helping me, right? Like
Yeah. The
and so
service you were referring to is
hmm
actually coming into fruition almost.
exactly. One much better way of phrasing it. So that kind of answers your question of like what I would like and like where I'm figuring out how to be of service in my life is not nursing. It's
Yeah.
not this. It's maybe just sharing my story and like giving people a safe space to like talk about what they're feeling, what they're going through. Let's honor it and validate and be like, you're not alone. Here's something
Yes.
that helped, even if it's just information, even if it's just like you want to grow your own mushrooms. Like it's so simple. Like do it. Here's
Yeah.
a shaman I've worked with that works really well. Like if I'm the middleman to like some modality, even if it's just, even better if it's all yoga, right? Like
Yes.
because I feel in my life everything comes back to yoga. Yoga is not something that I go and I show up to do on my mat. It's something all day,
Mm-hmm.
every day I'm working to be yoga. And plant medicines are just such a small tool in like helping me be a better practicer of the yoga, like truly,
Yeah.
honestly, like, and that's my journey now is like I microdose on some days when I feel pulled to, but it's not. That's the cool thing about psychedelics, which we alluded to earlier. It's like a biologist doesn't keep looking through a microscope and examining the dish, right? It's like they look, they come up, they go evaluate, and they take note. And if
I
they're
love
curious
that.
and they need to see something else, they go examine it again. But that's how psychedelics
Mm-hmm.
are. It's like they are the perceiving glass through which we look at our and evaluate our mind. So
Wow.
I don't have to constantly be like staring and evaluating it. I now need to come integrate all these things into my life. And that's where yoga is like such a beautiful, gentle little transition that helps me like pull what I'm learning in this space and be like, okay, well, I'm human, part alien. I don't know. That's jury's still out, but like I'm human
We
and
can
I'm
get
like
into
that.
that.
Yeah, right. That's a whole different podcast, I feel like.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I think answered your question of kind of how to where I see it with where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah, you did. And what I love the most is you're supporting a group of people who, as you highlighted, need support and help, and have been failed in a lot of ways. So I think that's beautiful. But you also have this relational connection that, like if I were to try and step into a space such as, you know, a veteran, let's say, like I can't speak to the healing and the process that a lot of people probably are seeking.
Mhm.
So I just love that you're creating a space that's unique and supporting a group of people that are in need. One other
Thank
thing that you said that really resonated with me was your explanation of the microscope. But it's funny. I think when I think back to like what a stigma towards a particular substance might be, right? That's all taught, and not necessarily experienced. And I just think it's interesting how we're constantly undoing those things. To your point, like you and I both have probably similar. Actually, I would say all of us have a very, like, in the early days, people tell you, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And you are like, okay, got it. Like, I will totally obey those rules of life. But as you get older and you gather wisdom with your experiences, you start to unravel a lot of that. And we were talking about earlier, like we're programmed in a lot of ways to fall in line in our regular
hmm
lives too,
hmm
to obey unsaid rules and subtle expectations. And I just, I wanted to highlight that because I think right now, like in my spiritual journey and just like getting way further connected with who I am and who I've thought I was up until this point. Um, Yoga's been a huge tool of that, but at the end of the day, it's like, holy shit. Like, I am just a silly little human on earth experiencing all of this connection and this growth, and I'm here for a reason. And now I'm rambling, but like,
Oh,
what
please.
you just said, so much, we have to go inward, but we also have to pull our heads up sometimes and say, like, let's just freaking live life and enjoy it and like
Yes.
find the connection and find the service that feels good
Mhm.
to us right now. And that can evolve and that can change and grow and develop into something completely different. And
Mhm.
so that was beautiful what you said.
Well, what you just said was beautiful, and like something I struggle with is like when I mentioned when my spiritual journey started, I jumped head in, and then my mom actually had to remind me of like, honey, like come back, be human, enjoy like this experience is like it doesn't have to always be deep and like soul searching
Oh,
and like healing. It's like you just said, go look for the signs, go be of service, like go live your life, this one of one masterpiece that you are, like go experience it,
mm-hmm.
like go do the things, So beautifully said and
Yeah.
just a lovely reminder.
Yeah. We need it. We need it.
Yep.
So, as we wrap up, I've got a few little rapid fire questions that I ask all my guests.
Sure.
And the first one is, why do you think spiritual connection is important?
I believe spiritual connection is important because it helps, I can't speak for anyone else but myself, so it helps me
Love
see
that.
that there is a presence and love in me that exists in every single other person, thing,
Mm,
life form, anything else you see that Ram Dass talks about. Everything is God and drag. Spirituality helps me remind myself that no matter what my ego and my mind is trying to tell me of what I'm perceiving in front of me, it's still an apparition of God of sorts, right? Like it's self,
yeah.
which is self. So that spirituality is self. So everything else is self. It's a mirror reflecting spirituality on me. So like
Oh my
it gave me
gosh.
chills even saying that, but like that's why spirituality is important for me. It's like it's not about me, the ego. Charles is gonna one day not exist, but what I can tap into right now is forever. You know, that
Mm-hmm.
this love is gonna
Oh,
emit forever and forever and forever. So as often as I can remind myself to feel it and touch it and be it in it, it's that's why it's important to me.
I love that. I'm obsessed with drag. I don't know if you knew that about me, but
I
I am
didn't, but I
like
love
an
that.
avid RuPaul's Drag Race watcher and fan. And I think it's such an art form and it's just so beautiful. Like the self-expression there, and the depth and the variety and
Hmm.
contextualization that you need to even understand like drag. But it's
Hmm.
so funny. I always say, like, I quote RuPaul, we're all born naked and the rest is drag. So
Yeah.
you're just a little
Well,
skin suit running
yeah,
around as a
exactly.
reflection of God or whatever
Yeah.
energy that you associate with. I love it. Um, so for those who might be listening and are looking to deepen their spiritual practices or maybe even get started, what's one piece of advice that you would give to them?
Do yoga.
I love
I
it.
really, I believe that yoga is the medicine of the mind, body, and soul. You,
Hmm.
one of my favorite teachers talks about how you might kind of what we spoke about in the psychedelic experience. You can show up with a set of expectations. Yoga is always going to give you what you need, not what you want. So
Yes.
a lot of people are pulled to that as like a physical workout, and then all of a sudden spirituality is happening, and they don't. It's like under the surface, and you're not even aware of it. And then all of a sudden, like something happens, and there's this shift, and you
Yeah.
see that like yeah, it's like a way of being instead of like something you do. And so
Yep.
that would be my number one recommendation is like no matter and to have no judgments about where you're starting. That's what I love about practice is like you see peoples of all walks of life, all physical conditions, all mental spaces, like you show up as one of the union and like you just go be
Hmm.
you with no expectations for that time. It's just you
Yeah.
surrounded by people who are supporting you being you because they're being them and you're supporting them being them, like
Yeah. Oh,
so
that's so
that's
beautiful.
that's would be my recommendation is just go do some yoga.
Yeah. The interconnected web that we weave is sometimes when I sit back and think about it, I'm like, woof, that's
It's nuts.
crazy, just cool. Like
Yeah.
the fact that there's an energy that exists and we're all connected in physical form in some way. It's just
Hmm.
wild. I love it.
Hmm.
Um, what's a book or resource that you would recommend to listeners to learn more about anything we talked about today? You mentioned Ram Dass, so is there
Hmm.
something you love from him, a podcast, a book, or like I said, any other resource that you have used and enjoy?
Can I give a podcast, a book, and we'll go from there? A
Absolutely. Both, please.
a podcast I've come to love. So Ram Dass is no longer alive, but someone who I feel like
Right.
is a pioneer in the psychedelic space, the wellness space, the just evolution of humankind is Aubrey Marcus. Aubrey
Okay.
Marcus, he he has such a just a beautiful podcast. He talks to a lot of people in the psychedelic space. He's just a pioneer in the space. Really takes a lot of Ram Dass's teaching and makes it somehow more digestible for our culture because Ram Dass is from the 70s, 80s. There's a lot that has changed, but is obviously stuff will never change. But Aubrey Marcus kind of weaves that in just so beautifully, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And then a book is The Four Agreements. The Four Agreements
We love that
has,
one.
yeah, completely just shaped how I show up. And it was like, I celebrate a lot of the beauty of my human existence is that I forget. And I have this compassion that it's okay to forget. And like I know the four
Oh, I
agreements, and
love
it's
that.
okay if I maybe show up to a situation and I have forgotten that like to not take something personally.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. I'm human. As long as I can come back and like talk myself out of like, oh shit, that person's just showing up as a human. Like they're just sharing their opinion of me or it of the situation. Like, who am I to take it personally? Like, okay, so like the four agreements in that way is like it's really a tool that I can come back to homeostasis, right? If you're
Yeah,
practicing the four agreements, like, yeah. So that's
you're
like,
set.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, perfect.
Oh,
And,
when I
and
first read
really
that book,
anything
I
from
was
Don
like,
Miguel Ruiz, anything from
yeah,
Don Miguel Ruiz is, yeah.
fantastic.
Hmm.
Yeah. I remember when I first read that book, I was like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like in a good way. I was like,
Yeah,
are you
yeah.
joking?
Right.
Like
Right. It
like
was that
we
simple all along.
overcomplicate. Yes, we overcomplicate so much, and it makes you
Hmm.
feel silly for a second, but also like not guilty silly, but like, oh my God, like I take myself way too freaking
Hmm.
seriously. Like being
Hmm.
human is fun, despite some of the darkness and the scary things and that we
Hmm.
experience. Like we're here to enjoy, honestly, and to connect, and that's
Hmm.
ultimately what our purpose is. So relax, have
Yep.
fun.
Yep.
Cool. My last question for you is where can our listeners find you? So, whether it be social media or even maybe a yoga class that you'd like to mention in case people are in the area and want to
For
flow with you.
sure. We'll start with that. I teach yoga at a studio in Phoenix where we're at, called The Foundry. I teach Wednesdays and Thursdays. Would love to come see you. And then on Thursdays and Fridays, I teach at a bouldering gym, brand new in Tempe, called the Bouldering Project. Even if you're not a yogi, if you're a climber, come check it out. Come say hi. I usually have this backwards black hat on.
Yep.
Um, and then on Instagram, I my handle is Chucky Tree. And then I just started kind of a veteran space where it's still up and developing, but my intention with it is to just make that safe space for veterans to get information on plant medicine or to share through comments or through DMs what they're going through. Anything. We
Yeah.
heal from a community, right? And even if it's not plant-based, like just knowing that you have support in a community is really powerful and impactful. And that Instagram handle is called Veteran Revival.
Hmm.
Veteran
Beautiful.
Revival is so yeah, kind of comes off that death and reincarnation under God's supervision, is removing that stigma of drugs and replacing it
Hmm.
like mentally with medicine. It's healing. It's a healing process. So
Yeah. That's beautiful.
revival, and also like there is a shedding of sorts of old belief systems and structures that dies, and
Oh,
like we are tend to shy away from death, but death is also part of the process of rebirth and healing and regrowth and
oh
revival. So
gosh. It's so funny you say that, and so beautifully said. I have been theming a lot of my yoga classes around like you can't take everything with you. We hold on to everything up to this point that has made us who we are. That
hmm.
means it's going to continue with me, and it's going to be
Hmm.
like that baggage, that positive or negative, defines me. And I've been talking a lot about like fall, this transitional period of like moving from a very busy time, very light energy to more of a heavier, restful, easeful type of energy. And that's been coming through a lot of like what can you let die and honestly
Hmm.
allow to be absorbed back by the earth, and instead you
Hmm.
take the energy that you're ready to for the rebirth of whatever's
That is
next. And
so
it's
beautiful.
not better, but it might be different, right?
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
a constant cycle. We live in
Yep.
cycles.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Charles, thank you so much for joining me today and like not only myth busting and educating a little bit more on plant medicine, but just sharing the beautiful wisdom and the vulnerability of your journey. I so appreciate it, and we'll definitely have to have you back on to highlight your revival piece and project and all that stuff once you're up and running.
Thank you, Caitlin. I truly, truly appreciate you creating a space, a safe space for me to talk about things and shed light on anything people might be curious about. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, I'll
Okay.
talk to you soon.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.